Hey everybody, hello, welcome to the 5G Hub. I'm seeing lots and lots of empty seats here, so I'd love it if all of you can make your way over to the seats so we can get this thing started. So good to have all of you here. Welcome to fall. Goodness gracious, it is pouring out there. Those of you that are joining us remotely via our live broadcast of this event, hope it's sunny where you're at, although you're probably ahead of us and it's probably dark, but hope you have good weather. Good to have all you beautiful faces here. We're going to go ahead and turn down the bar and the food service. We'd love for everybody to get into your seats. And if you've been here over the past few sessions, you know this thing we do is our trivia. There's some prizes to be won. I'm seeing some familiar faces. I don't want to say it's because of the trivia, but you know the prizes are nice, I hear. Let's get this thing kicked off. Let's see, who's ready to win some prizes? Make your way over, and the only way to win prizes is if you're seated and I can see your arm up and I can call on you. And our first question is obviously very in theme with tonight's topic of cybersecurity. What percentage of security professionals attribute the rise of cyber attacks to bad actors using Gen AI? I don't know if you guys are allowed to answer, by the way. You guys know way too much. Is it A, 47%, B, 64%, C, 71%, or D, 85%? First hand I saw go up. Oh my goodness, it's like he knows. D, 85%. Kudos. Yeah, feel free to clap for him. That's what winners look like right there, yes. I've got some empty seats here. Feel free to make your way over. It'll be way better if you're seated here. I'll keep doing that, see if I can bribe you over. Let's see, next question. Leading organizations believe it is important to fight fire with fire by developing or adopting solutions that use Gen AI to monitor network traffic for malicious activity, flag suspicious patterns and highlighting potential threat indicators, automate incident response, which is detection, assessment, triggering response, or D, oh my gosh, everybody's got their hands up on this one. I think I know why. Let's see. Let's go with you, sir, right there. Yeah. Oh my goodness, D it is. All of the above. Fantastic. I'm seeing some hands go up in the park. Make your way over. Be seated so I can call on you. I'll just keep saying that even if you don't listen. Let's do this next question. What is the name for a security framework that requires all users in or outside of the organization's network to continuously authenticate and validate to maintain access on applications? You, sir, in the blue. He's giving us the A for zero trust. Do we agree? Yes, we do. It is zero trust. Kudos to you. Right there in the back corner. Thank you for clapping and giving him the recognition he deserves. Thank you. Yes, yes. Kudos to you. All right, next up. Human error equates to 95% of cybersecurity breaches. That is a fact. What is the most common contributing human error? Is it A, easy to guess passwords, B, double-clicking or on an infected attachment or unsafe URL, C, lost laptops or mobile devices, or D, disclosure of regulated info via use of an incorrect email address? You, sir. B, double-clicking on an infected attachment or unsafe URL is the most common contributing factor. By the way, I got, my cyber team sent me an email earlier today, and it was really well done. And I looked at it and I was like, wait a second, this looks weird because it's got all these things on it, but it's got a weird date on it. I was like, oh, should I report it? And you know, thankfully I did. I was being tested by my cyber team, so thank you, but also I didn't fall for it. You'll get me next time, Derek. I know. Yeah, you're trying. Next up, the global cybersecurity market created as a response to new cyber threats is projected to hit what value? Is it, let's go bottom up this time. Is it D, 189 billion by 2030? C, 305 billion by 2030? That's a lot of money. Is it B, 212 billion by 2030? Or is it A, $424 billion by 2030? I saw your hand go up first, but I'm not going to call on you because you already got you once. How about you, sir? B is very close. It is not B. Yes? He's going with A. He's going big. He's here to win, and it is true. $424 billion by 2030. Wow. Okay, here we go. I think this is our last one. Get those arms ready, because you can't click in. 5G connectivity can unlock a hybrid cloud architecture. That is a fact. What percentage of surveyed enterprises are already testing private 5G-enabled networks? Is it A, 37%, B, 42%, C, 58%, or D, 61%? You, sir. B is one of the four choices. It's not the correct one. It's a good guess. You, sir. D is one of the other choices. It's not correct. You, sir. Yes. C is correct. I'm so glad you didn't wait until the last one, because that would have been too easy. C is the correct answer, 58%. That concludes our trivia, folks. Thank you for being here. It's way more fun if you're seated in this front row. You can put your drinks down, by the way. I'm going to keep enticing you. It's not working. We are so excited to have you all here. Like I said, we are especially excited to have some amazing demos from some incredible companies there in the back. Thank you, sir. I owe you a 20 after the show. We've got some amazing demos there in the back from Cribble, Tynes, Bugcrowd, and Exabeam. Thank you for being here. If you haven't seen those demos, definitely do check it out after the panel discussion. And if you've been here before, you know we are here as a resource of the community, obviously, to innovate and work with T-Mobile and work with us, innovate with us. Do go to our website, techexperience.com. We'd love to hear from you, get your projects in, and do some cool stuff together. So with that, I'm going to get off the stage because you're not here to see me, and let's get the show started. Thanks.
Hello. Good afternoon. I guess let's probably say good evening. It feels dark and gloomy. Well, welcome to our 5G Hub speaker series. And because it is October, which is officially Cybersecurity Awareness Month, we thought it would be a perfect and very relevant topic for our panel discussion today. As high-speed connectivity with 5G further accelerates the proliferation of data and the ability to access this data, new cyber risks and vulnerabilities are introduced. Organizations will need to embrace responsibilities, such as safeguarding user privacy throughout the data value chain, supporting new multi-factor trust and monitoring systems, and adopting AI-powered solutions to protect against emerging cyber threats. Today, as companies navigate this disruption, they are also battling existing cyber threats and trends, including social engineering scams, increasing data breaches, and AI-enabled cyber attacks. In fact, 83% of businesses in the US have fallen victim to some type of phishing attack. And we saw a 44% year-over-year increase in 2022 of victims affected by enterprise data breach or leaks. To deal with these challenges, companies need to address three important areas. First, data privacy and governance are a business imperative now, and consumers are demanding companies to take action to protect against their digital privacy. Second is process. Organizations will need to incorporate zero-trust solutions across the enterprise to mitigate bad actors from exploiting internal systems. And third, advanced technology. Cyber attacks will continue to become more sophisticated, and organizations will need to keep investing in AI-enabled security solutions. Just this last month, T-Mobile has announced T-Mobile Secure Access Service Edge, or SASE, with two groundbreaking capabilities for businesses and organizations, T-SIM Secure and T-Mobile Security Slice. These offerings leverage the latest in wireless technologies for organizations to better protect their networks, applications, and information. We are all about exciting new solutions and opportunities with 5G. Many we have explored and discussed here at our speaker series sessions. However, it's imperative as a technology innovation ecosystem that we partner, prioritize, and invest in these efforts to address cybersecurity. And that's exactly what we are going to discuss today. So please join me in welcoming our panelists out on stage. Welcome. Thank you for joining. All right, we have some cybersecurity experts in the house tonight. So I'll start off with some introductions. First, we have Casey Ellis, who is chairman, founder, and chief technology officer of Bugcrowd, as well as a co-founder of the Disclose.io project. Casey pioneered the crowdsourced security as a service model, launching the first bug bounty programs on Bugcrowd platform in 2012, and co-founded the Disclose.io vulnerability disclosure standardization project in 2014. Since then, he has personally advised the U.S. Department of Defense and the Department of Homeland Security, CISA, the Australian and UK intelligence communities, and various U.S. House and Senate legislative cybersecurity initiatives, including preemptive cyberspace protection ahead of the 2020 presidential elections. Thanks for joining, Casey. All right, next we have Jennifer Manella, founder and principal advisor at Vizen Security. Named as one of the cybersecurity's top 10 power players, Jennifer has been helping security-conscious organizations solve technical challenges in meaningful ways. She has served as a trusted advisor to some of the world's largest companies, creating technical and leadership strategies to accelerate digital transformation. Jennifer is also the author of 2 books, Wireless Security Architecture and Low-Tech Hacking. Her ability to connect with audiences and articulate technical concepts has taken Jennifer all over the world. Thanks for joining, Jennifer. All right, and next we have Clarence Foster, Business Information Security Officer here at T-Mobile. With more than 22 years of security professional experience in the industry, Clarence is responsible for ensuring the overall digital security of his assigned business division. With his knowledge of the company's security program, policies, and solutions, Clarence provides guidance to business stakeholders on security protections, customer security requirements, and regulatory controls. Prior to T-Mobile, Clarence served as the VP of Information Security, IT, and CISO at NetMotion Software by Absolute. Under his leadership, the company successfully transitioned operations to the cloud and established a robust IT security infrastructure. Thanks for joining, Clarence. All right, and then finally, we have Gagan Shourie, Customer Cybersecurity Director at Ericsson North America. Gagan has more than 25 years of cross-functional experience in telecommunications, cybersecurity, security ops, compliance, and more. His experience centers around information and communication technology in multiple markets, including Asia, Africa, and North America, driving new security initiatives into 4G, 5G, IoT, private networks, enterprise, and 5G cloud deployment opportunities. All of that, wow. With his wealth of experience and knowledge, Gagan is accountable for strengthening Ericsson's capability to sell, develop, and deliver solutions that effectively meet customers' security needs. Thank you for joining, Gagan. All right, so I'm going to start off with a couple questions, and actually I'm going to turn it over to the audience here a bit sooner this evening because we, I think, had the most questions submitted during our registration. So I know you guys have a ton of questions, both here in the audience and those joining us virtually. Please put your comments or your questions in the chat, and we'll ask those here for you. So let's get started. So to kick things off, when considering the current cybersecurity environment and why this ecosystem is here about 5G and new solutions, what do you view as our greatest risk right now? What is keeping you up at night?
Yeah, and thanks for having us, T-Mobile. Thank you, Erin, for the introductions and all those things. It's a question I think about a lot. I think the thing that concerns me most is just the acceleration of everything. I've often referred to cybersecurity as a human problem that's sped up by technology. The idea of leaving your front door unlocked and someone else exploiting that, it predates the internet by a couple of thousand years, but we've gone and sped it up. And in the process of doing that, we've put tools in the hands of attackers, we've put tools in the hands of defenders as well, which is what this is all about, and created a whole lot of attack surface for them to go off and do their thing with. So, what that nets out to, I think, is a lot more activity, a lot more news of breaches, a far wider range of threat actors showing up. It's not just your traditional financially motivated criminals or nation-state actors anymore. There's hacktivists and people that are just kind of doing it for fun that have got incredible tooling available that are starting to show up and use it now. So, yeah, it's just getting more and more chaotic.
Absolutely, yeah. Jennifer.
Oh, man. Chaos is a good way to explain it. I think since you mentioned 5G, I'm going to maybe color my answer a little bit towards that and just say I think the sheer volume that we're dealing with, I mean, not just the volume of the devices that are connected, but the volume of the relationships and communications between those devices and the users and the applications and the data sets. And then everything, of course, moving into the cloud where it's not as simple as walking over and looking at the blinky light and touching it. It's more abstracted than that. And so certainly the chaos of all of that, of just everything converging at once, and us not, as the defenders, not necessarily having a good handle on what we have where and with the relationships of communications and the hierarchy of those things so that we can always monitor and protect them appropriately.
Yeah. Jennifer. Clarence.
And I got to say that if you look at the history of just the whole industry and cybersecurity in general, it took a pretty, going from the worms of the early 2000s into malvertising into now to where we are at now. There are full businesses on the darknet that are actually helping people set everything up. It's not like you had to go to your peers and learn this here and learn that there. No, buy this from us. We'll not only license it to you, but you can use it to go and attack anyone that you like ransomware as a service or something of that nature. It's even gone so far from a business standpoint to that they even have their own tech support desks for when someone gets ransomware to help them make sure they get the key right so they can unlock the ransomware and the encryption. So that's a little bit scary to me because now you just have to want to do it. You don't have to actually build it. You don't actually have to work with all your friends and test all these things out. I can just go buy it like Walmart or something, right? And here's my package and now I can go do what I want with it, right? So, yeah.
Gagan.
Yeah. 5G is a critical infrastructure, and the network is becoming complex every day, day by day. So the security posture has to be strong. What makes me worry in night is a lot of threats, like supply chain threats, and then IoT devices, like Casey has said, is increasing day by day. Is uncontrolled fashion in logging into the network. You have to identify and authenticate, and then do the encrypt and do the data management, and then also do the security. Is not only what we have to implement, but then also continue monitor. And the threat actors are ahead. They are using technologies much faster than us. And then if we don't adapt to our 5G network, the faster than the threat actors, then we will left behind. So we should start from our security posture to make it strengthen more by doing the perimeter security, the network security, and then going into an advanced level of maybe another kind of zero trust architecture into 5G network.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks, Gagan. Jennifer, I want to go back to your comment. I think talking about the vastness of this and the billions of devices and what our enterprises are facing right now. What would you say enterprises and organizations are doing right in managing and I guess becoming more protected against these attacks? And what do they need to start doing right away that they're not?
That's a great question. I think the thing that we're doing right is, first of all, we're talking about it. So visibility is good even when it's a problem. I think that's the first step. Knowing is half the battle, right? And knowing what you don't know is still half the battle. So that's helpful. So I think just acknowledging that we have this visibility gap and this issue. And then I think the what we could be doing better and what we need to be thinking about has to do with the speed at which we are trying to get ahead of that curve instead of riding the end of it. We have some opportunity to do some work. I mean, a lot of what I do right now is zero trust architectures. Gaga and I were talking about this, and there's a lot of misconception about what that means and how to implement it. It is a real thing. It's not just the centerpiece on your bingo card. But it starts with asset inventory, and it starts with understanding what you have, defining the protect surface, and then mapping those different transactions. And until we can get through those first couple of steps, we're not well positioned for these cool, sexy, advanced defensive techniques.
What would you say is the biggest resistance for enterprise and organizations? Is it just the lift, the cost? What's slowing them?
Good. It varies, and so I've worked in everything from large public sector with the federal government down to like the charter school or the K-12 school down the street, and financial organizations, healthcare. Common threads through all of them, but they each kind of have their own little flavor of what's not happening in their environment, and part of it depends on the industry that they're in and other priorities that are competing for that attention. Certainly when you're in healthcare, you have a lot of the patient care is number one. The guest access to internet unfettered is number two, and then everything else kind of falls in behind that. So they have different challenges, I think, there.
Thank you. Clarence, do you maybe want to share a little bit about from working with T-Mobile and how T-Mobile is managing through some of this?
Yeah, I mean, I think the idea, with a large company such as T-Mobile is first getting your cyber hygiene correct first, right? I mean, the basics, asset management, your identity access management, knowing what your major risks are to where your data is housed and stored. Those types of things on a risk-based level, you first have to get to know what that is, and then start to do the solutions, or start to put together the solutions that are going to protect that data, take it from a data-centric standpoint, understand your risk, understand how valuable your data is and where it's located, and how are we going to protect that data, right, just from a basic standpoint. And then you throw in governance in that, right? I mean, governance seems to be getting lost along the way in a lot of cases, and therefore people start to kind of maybe stop, adhering to it as much, or maybe your cybersecurity policies. So going back and making sure you have some sort of team that is going to audit those policies against what the actual process is that you might be reviewing or that you're seeing in the company when you do this risk-based model of what exactly or how much your data is worth and what's the most riskiest data. So I think, ultimately, it's just got to be that basics first. And then you can start to become more defense in depth, and maybe you can add in the advanced types of, something like deception technology or something like that. But it makes no sense to go buy those things and try to implement them before getting the basics correct first. So.
Makes sense. In case I see you nodding, I know earlier we were talking about some of the challenges some of the legacy companies have with older infrastructure.
Yeah.
And maybe you want to elaborate a little bit on that.
Definitely. It's interesting because you're asking, what is something that I see companies doing well. I think just admitting the fact that none of us are going to get this perfect in the first place, and actually working with that as a baseline truth of how you approach security. The companies that actually do that are the ones that end up most resilient, because instead of kind of fighting that, they're working with it, and involving stuff like what we do, where you're going out and inviting input from security researchers from all around the world. I think the opposite of that is something that you see more often in older organizations, where it's what I like to call ostrich risk management. It's like, okay, I'm just going to pretend this doesn't exist, and hopefully that'll mean it doesn't matter. I do think that actually worked for a period of time. There was a season, attacks and kind of the evidence of bad things happening if you don't do cybersecurity well. I've been doing this now for 25 years, and that only really started to ramp up over the last 10. So that strategy, you could argue it wasn't working, but it was looking like it was working. And I think that's one of the biggest challenges that those older organizations have. Like, there's logistics of marrying legacy infrastructure with modern infrastructure, digital transformation, all of those different things that need to happen on the technical side. But before that, you've got to actually, as an organization, adopt a posture of, like, we're not going to get this right, that's okay, let's get everyone in the same boat towards trying to do it better.
Thank you. Gagan, anything you would like to add?
No, I just wanted to add, I think the old infrastructure, you have to patch a lot, and there are vulnerabilities and end of life, end of support, and it makes it more vulnerable into the network. So you don't want to keep it, right? So how do you spend less CapEx and then have more secure networks in terms of do a hardware decoupling of the hardware and the software, that if there is a security patch, you don't have to replace the whole hardware, but just work towards the security and take care of the application where the security bug is and fix that. So that will solve some of the problems, and there are solutions which are looking at the cloud native, where you have the cloud infrastructure, at least the infrastructure is common, you don't have to worry about that, and it's not getting old, but then you can patch it simultaneously using the latest techniques of automation and other stuff, and it will be much faster. You can reduce your OpEx and then CapEx both.
Thank you. All right, so staying in the theme of enterprises and larger organizations, how do they win back trust from consumers? How do they build that trust? What are some of the, I guess, best practices that maybe you have seen that have been effective, and maybe what do we need to do more of?
Yeah, I could jump in on that one. This is partly informed by the work that you mentioned around election security. The idea of explaining what you're doing when it comes to security to your users in a way that they're going to understand. So I think as an enterprise, we're at a point in history where I think the average, even non-technical internet user is vaguely concerned about all this stuff. They might not know what's going on, but at this point they consider cyberspace as an extension of their physical space. So they're thinking about safety in the same way you do when you walk to your car at night or whatever that might be. So as a vendor, to me, it's two things. One is doing security better and constantly striving to defend the interests of your user and not just your shareholder. And then the other is helping them understand that you're doing that, because they're not going to know. Like you talk about all the technical stuff that we can do, they'll glaze over. And with the election piece, what we did with that was to basically partner with DHS and CISA to launch vulnerability disclosure programs on. So looking for opportunities like that and actually using them, I think that's pretty important, something that every company should think about at this point.
So transparency, education, and then I also think empowering too, letting them set controls and privacy to customize for what's important to them.
Absolutely. Yeah, I do think the education part almost implies empowerment, because I do think the problem that the average, again, non-technical internet user has, they want to make better choices, they just don't understand how, or they don't even understand the framework of that choice. So educating them, I think, opens that up to some degree, but yeah, empowering them to do that as well, for sure.
Jennifer, anything to add?
Yeah, I mean, you said empowerment, but I feel like, there's that shared responsibility we've been talking about, where, there's this, you can educate the user, especially from a consumer standpoint, but you have to help themselves. So you can empower them, but sometimes there's a little push, and we need to change what some of our default settings are, just so we're starting at a better security posture. And I think sometimes, consumers kind of feel like, as security professionals, those of you that are also security professionals, you probably feel the way that we do about it, where you kind of have an understanding about the tier of criticality or confidentiality of the data, and you're going to protect your bank account and your this account and your that account with a certain level. But the average consumer might not understand that, and they don't necessarily understand the hierarchy of, okay, well, I've heard multi-factor. Well, all multi-factor isn't created equal. So we have a lot of organizations still using SMS-based, text messaging. And so there's this empowerment, but I think that we have to do a better job collectively as an industry and the vendors in the space to really educate the users and be more forceful with it instead of making it an option, making it secure by default. Yeah. And then I think from a building trust standpoint, I think transparency is huge. And I think if you look at how we all understand breaches will happen, and in the security community, those of us that work heavily in this space every day, I advise CISOs and CIOs, it's not really if, it's usually when and how. It's like a rating on a safe, a fire safe, right? Like how long can that thing be exposed to fire before an actor gets into it? So you're trying to just increase your safe rating there. And then it's how you respond to it. Are you going to go, yes, something has happened, we're figuring this out, and we are going to tell you exactly what this was and whether or not you were impacted and to what degree? Or are we going to just tell you that we don't really have any evidence that this bad thing happened, which doesn't actually mean anything? So the response, I think, is a huge part of building consumer trust.
Okay. Thank you. All right, so I'm going to ask another question, and then I'll turn it over to the audience. Clarence and Gagan, I guess maybe going back to specifically around 5G and 5G technology and infrastructure, how do we need to approach this differently than with 4G and in prior generations?
From prior generations, there is a lot of security focus, and the strong security posture has been implemented in 5G. So if I dissect, it's an end-to-end approach, which in 5G has been taken horizontally and vertically both. If you talk horizontally, it's from the users to our network and to their service, like enterprise, our customers. And then horizontally, vertically, from our hardware, software, to our applications, to data management, and how we operate the security operations on top of it. So there is an end-to-end approach. Now, most of you know that 5G is the RAN network and the core and the applications. So in the RAN, is the most critical part where user get an access. So we have to have those kind of authentication methods, which has been implemented in 5G. You have the AKA and the PKI certifications, which has been implemented. And then there is on the transport network, when the network talks to the core, there is an IPsec tunnels, which has been built to secure more on the 5G network. And then before your core network, again, you have security gateways. So there is an enhanced encryption in between data in transit and then data in motion, and also when data is at the rest. And then if you talk about the core of the network in 5G, it is spread into different virtual network functions, and its services is exposed to the APIs. And then when you expose to the APIs, now you are not talking about in the 4G, once you are inside the core network as the attack actor, he's inside. But here, even you are inside, you are, again, has to authenticate yourself, right, with different network functions. And that's where enhanced security comes into picture. And now, going forward in 5G, the use cases are already started with the network slicing. That's the most prominent. I think you announced in your present one about the network slicing, the TET slice. So you can segment different networks depending upon the latency they want you to use or the use case they have. A person who needs in a critical infrastructure or a mission critical thing, they need a low bandwidth and ultra latency, and that's a network slicing. Security features are different for that. But a normal user who's using a Facebook or other social medias, he has a different criteria, and he can use different slicing pattern, and that's called as a micro-segmentation. So another security layer in the micro-segmentation has been built into the 5G network. And then we talk about the applications part and how the data is being secured. So even after you implement everything, you would need to continue monitor and secure. So the 5G nodes and all the assets, they're giving you all the monitoring. Talking about the SOPI on the IMSI catcher, which was the prior generations, someone will do a man-in-the-middle attack and then capture the IMSI attack, and then your IMSI is captured, and then the attacker is in your RAN or core network. But here you have a SOPI implemented, where even your roaming interfaces and you can easily keep track of who's going into your network. So a lot of interfaces, like I said, it's an end-to-end approach in the 5G for the security from horizontally to the vertical.
Yeah, and I think probably most of us aren't cellular experts, yeah. So I think what I heard was you're talking about the MZ as the subscriber ID that's tied to an equipment ID, and then now there's a way to kind of obscure that to the casual observer so that nobody's intercepting that.
Intercepting that,
yeah. There's so many points, I guess, checkpoints of authentication, yes. Right? I think from beginning to end going through the network, from the RAN through the core. Not that I want to disclose this publicly, but I guess, you've outlined a lot of safeguards and barriers, but are there specific areas that we do need to focus more on, or I don't want to say necessarily are most vulnerable, but yes.
Yeah, I can talk a little bit about
Please.
that. Yeah, so what I like about some of the things that we're doing now is you have this hard like SIM inside devices, right? And taking advantage of that technology so that you can ensure security at a network layer where it's transparent to the end user, right? And as we've talked here, I mean, we launched our SASE solution there, which is starting to begin to take advantage of that SIM authentication process. But whether it's a B2B or it's B2G, and I'm mostly working in the B2B, B2G world, not the consumer side as much. And I think the real great thing about network slicing is that it's so adaptable to your particular need. So if you want to segment or you want to secure a specific network slice in the way that you want to do it, say, as a SASE solution, you could run SASE in that network slice by itself, right? Which gives you all that segmentation, which gives you all the security control as a customer that you want to set up for yourself based on your requirements. So the great thing about that 5G is that flexibility, and not even just in the security in 5G as a technology itself, right? So I would say that improving and moving forward using that SIM technology along the network, I think is very exciting.
Yeah, absolutely. If we can go ahead and get the mics out, we can start with some questions here in the audience. But yeah, I think that's a great point, Clarence. I think as we continue to see 5G advance, there's going to be new ways for us to use those controls to help enhance those security. Mm-hmm. Absolutely. All right, so we're going to turn it over to the audience. I know you guys have questions. And I did save the AI question for you. I didn't ask that one. Yes, please, go right ahead.
I guess I'll start. So you guys mentioned that everything's moving real fast and it's a human problem. And it's just like the seatbelt. You know what the benefit is, but if you don't put it on, it's not going to save your life. So how do we breach that human factor? How do we actually get people to not click 95% of the time on that link on their email? Everybody seems to be doing it. Everybody seems to be doing training. We got all this technology, but we still don't know what the behavior is. And you're saying is a lot of people kind of need to be educated, but I'm the generation that grew up with cell phones. My parents have not. How do we bring them into the how? Because this is the people that are being attacked right now.
Great question.
I mean, I think you've got to build it like it's broken to begin with, and think about the fact that if you're training users not to click links, there's going to be a subset of your population that'll actually receive that training, and then a smaller group that'll actually remember it, and then a smaller group that'll actually reliably act on it. And you've got to actually design security controls for everyone else at the same time as you're trying to reduce that risk from a user education standpoint. So I think in that specific example that you're talking about, it really does come back to the fact that users are going to user. They do crazy stuff, and we try to design in ways that orient them in the right direction, do same defaults, all those different things. They're still going to do crazy stuff because they're users and they're unpredictable, and we love them and we're here because of them. But we've got to just factor that in as a fact of life when we're thinking about securing all this stuff. So that's a principle that we've used at Bugcrowd since the get-go. Because you think about it, we've got 350,000 hackers on our platform on purpose, right? So things get weird with that population, and deliberately so. That's one of our design approaches. Build it like it's broken. Let's assume that at some point, whatever particular control we're talking about at that point in time will fail. Now, what's the secondary consequence of that, and how do we contain the blast radius of that, and so on and so forth?
Yep. Casey?
I hate phishing simulation, and I hate that we feel like we have to educate users on this. I think education's good. I do. But if we are relying on users to not click on stuff, because frankly, I feel pretty confident that somebody could write a phishing email that any one of us would click on, and even if that didn't happen, the other attack method that we see people using is compromising. It's adjacent email compromising of legitimate systems. So that means if we're doing business together and somebody compromises my email account or my domain, and they get in, and then they're sending you an email that actually is from my account, but you don't know that they've breached my account, there's not a lot of protection mechanism, especially at the point of the user, right? So we can move up the chain and we can talk about endpoint security and email security and all of these defense in depth things. There's your other bingo card. So, I hate that we feel like we have to rely on educating the users, although I do think, why not? It's good to make people aware that these things could happen. But that cannot be our only defense. And I'm going to get off the soapbox now and let Clarence jump in on that.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's tools that could be implemented that can stop a lot of those phishing attacks, right? The question is, as a user, you know, maybe if you're with an enterprise, that enterprise has the ability to put those tools in place, and they have the ability to, you know, buy one of the best tools out there potentially. But if I'm just an average user on there and I'm using some mail system that I just signed up for, I mean, are they going to put in that same type of solution to protect you from even getting those phishes in the first place? Because I agree that you cannot rely on a human firewall. It just doesn't work, right? And for those people that are victims, I mean, it has to be transparent, it has to be effective, so it just doesn't get to them. So how do you go about doing that? There's a lot of, say, small to medium businesses that I've seen in the past where their domains are being used you know, to launch phishing attacks, right? So, you know, things like if you sign up for a domain, maybe it should be required that it's automatically set up by the provider, you know, DKIM and DMARC and SPF, so that they cannot be spoofed in the first place to run through that domain. I see that from a lot of smaller businesses that may not have the staff or the security staff on board, maybe not at all. And even those three, you know, just doing DMARC and SPF, you know, and DKIM is going to stop a lot of that even being forwarded, and that it has to be authenticated before it gets forwarded from some other, you know, domain. So there's a lot of other simple things that you could do, and maybe the education of getting those free tools out there, or having even nonprofits or something that are made up that can help these small businesses, small to medium businesses do these types of things. Because I think they're the biggest target for attackers to use in terms of forwarding, you know, these types of emails and phishing attacks. Anyway.
Great. Thanks, Clarence. All right, next question.
All right, my question is about SIM hijacking. Not to pick on T-Mobile, but I'm a T-Mobile customer. And I've actually been a victim of a phishing attack, basically, where they've taken over my account and added you know, more lines and all that stuff. So I've enabled one of the features that you have, a security feature, which is, you know, a special code, a secret code, right? Yeah. The problem with that solution is that I'll forget it because I don't use it on a regular basis, and I have multiple, you know, members on my account. So the default goes down to information that I know, which they ask, right? So as we know, security is always as strong as your weakest link. I'd love to see T-Mobile and other, you know, obviously other carriers have a better solution for the consumers. It would be great to see something in that space. Thank you.
And I can probably answer some of that too. So one of the things about T-Mobile that I talk about with a lot of different customers, and I'm mainly talking to B2B customers, but even if I'm talking to B2B customers, they're asking me about how do we protect our own employees who have T-Mobile accounts, right? So that kind of goes back to the same consumer. The same tools that are available to them are the same tools that are available to consumers. I mean, we have some great free applications that T-Mobile puts out there. If you go to the App Store, you know, you can go ahead and download these like Scam Shield, right? You can download the McAfee security protection down on that. You can also sign up for multi-factor authentication and have an out-of-band authenticator on your account. You can also do a freeze on your account where the only way that account can be ported out or swapped is with your approval, right? So they have to come and get your approval. I mean, so maybe, I think there's a lot of good things that we're doing as T-Mobile, and maybe it's just a matter of getting that out more to the consumers, because I don't think it's being adopted as much, right? Maybe some sort of campaign. I'm also thinking of when you call in for whatever reason. Maybe you call in, I don't know, to say, change something on your account, right? Or even if you're actually going into your account with the T-Mobile app, that we have some sort of pop-up or something that can remind you of these things. There is one new, there's a security check now that's done when you log into your account that actually tells you your security score. And not only does it tell you your security score, it actually tells you what you need to do to get a higher security score. And some of that is setting up MFA. Some of that is the other things that I just mentioned. But also, if you're real concerned about it, you know, calling in or even telling people, call in so we can help you get set up on MFA, or we can help you put a freeze on your account so that you have to approve before we swap out. I think the tools are there for T-Mobile customers. It's just that, how do we get that out to them? And I know we've been working on this. The last thing I would say is more transparent security, again, with the SIM card technology across the network. Just implementing that and really pushing that to the edge. We started doing that. I can see more being developed down the road here for that. That would actually be transparent to the consumer. So it's not something you have to set up. It's just something that's always there anyway. But I do believe we have a lot of things to offer. It's just not necessarily something that every consumer is thinking about. And maybe we need to have some sort of campaign to help educate those people on those apps.
I actually asked, so maybe the information is new, but when I last asked, they said the only option for securing was that secret code. So I'd love to see all those options that you mentioned offered to consumers because, I'm security minded.
No, absolutely. I mean, I'm on LinkedIn. Send me a question. I'll help you. Not a problem.
Thanks, Clarence. All right, next question.
So, Clarence, I had to say I love that you brought up the ransomware as a service and the tech support line and stuff like that. I mean, I know that T-Mobile has a lot of J.D. Power awards for their customer service, but I think that like those ransomware as a service tech support would give them a run for their money. They do a really good job of like helping you to pay that ransom and stuff. Yeah. But my question is actually for Casey.
Sure.
I'm just curious. With the visibility you have with the business you're in. Either what interesting vulnerabilities have you seen come through in the 5G space, or which do you think are most applicable to the 5G space in the things that Bugcrowd sees every day?
Yeah, that's an interesting one. I think most of the stuff that we see come through that's cellular or specifically 5G, it's in the relationship between the device and the network. So it's more often device level. Probably the stuff that's more carrier specific. I'm just trying to think about how to respond to this a little bit here. But frankly, there's a lot of backhaul infrastructure that is lower hanging fruit. If you're talking about brand new technology that's got all these different aspects of crypto and just fun stuff built around it, you've got to overcome from a security research standpoint to be at a point where you can actually create a working exploit, as opposed to, well, what's it running on top of? Maybe I'll just hit that or go kind of deeper into the stack. So, I think that's where we see people focusing. There's a lot of attention on standards and just kind of the origin of those standards, like working out how those standards could potentially be improved or just battle tested and have that done in a transparent way. That goes back to, I think, market confidence as much as there might be security things that actually fall out of that. I mean, to me, it's still fairly early. Like, there's a very small pool, and this is the way it typically grows, right? Like, when you think about, we've been doing this for 11 years. Mobile application security didn't really exist as a market when we first kicked off, and then suddenly it did. So, okay, where's that going to come from? It's from people that understand C, people that understand Java. All of a sudden, they can understand Cocoa and Objective-C and all those different things, and you've got those kind of experts. There's this sort of Avengers Assemble thing that can happen with skill sets and with different people that we're just starting to see come together around 5G. I think that answer is going to evolve pretty rapidly. And I think the pressure on making sure that this stuff is as safe as it can possibly be, but then also I think the kind of international relations pressure and the scrutiny that's causing, I think that's all going to drive a lot of interest and research in this space over the next couple of years.
Gagan, you have anything to add?
Yeah, I can add a little bit into it. Vulnerabilities everywhere, right? So that's from the most in the network, like you asked for the question of 5G, is a lot of devices, IoT devices, they are fixed, they are packed in a tight scenario that you are not exposed to open them, right? And if a supply chain kind of a vulnerability exists when a free and open systems software was built for that IoT device, it's already there. When it latches up into your network, authenticates, it spreads that vulnerability. Then if you talk about the research and development in your applications, and because of lot complex applications that are being developed on top of the 5G, the free and open software is becoming very common. Log4j, I think everyone saw that vulnerability, and it was across portfolio, across industries, for anywhere, either it is telecom or retail, or you can talk about energy or whatever sector you see. So those kind of vulnerability even exposes us as vendors who are developing the applications, and see what methods we can see to detect those. And then the next step is there should not be any lateral movement of those ransomware or supply chain or free open software vulnerabilities which is happening, that where we can put that barrier to stop them and not to spread in the network.
Okay. Thank you.
And I wanted to just add to that too. I think two other quick points there are that I think if you're actively going to try to attack data or communication to or through an endpoint, it's much easier to just attack the endpoint, especially with cellular, because I think the equipment to attack cellular or even just work with cellular has been so expensive. It's been cost prohibitive. Now, I think that's going to change, especially with private cellular, because we're going to have these infrastructures in our organizations just like we're using Wi-Fi. That curve is going to take a steep, the cost benefit's going to flip a bit. And I think in the next 18 months out or so, I think the answers are going to be very different here.
Thank you. All right. So I know you guys have more questions, but I'm going to go ahead and ask my AI question, because we talked about new technologies, right? So I'd actually like to hear from each of you about this landscape now when you consider something like AI. The hackers are using AI. Organizations are using AI to help to solve the cybersecurity attacks. Share a little bit about how you see this landscape, and also maybe who's winning right now.
Who's winning? It's always the bad guys. Like, if they weren't winning, we wouldn't be gainfully employed. So that's kind of my stock answer to that question in some ways. Yeah, look, AI is being, it's to me, in some ways, it's interesting because it's no different to any other automation that's kind of arrived into a battle like this, right? You've got the adversary, you've got the defender. They both get a set of tools at the same time, and it really comes down to how they use those tools, which goes back to a part of what I was saying before around this being a fundamentally creative problem that we're solving here, just with greater and greater technology over time. I think the thing that's different about AI is that it's a step function in terms of the size of that lever. Like, I don't think we've really experienced that in recent history, at the very least. And yeah, it's being picked up. The phishing example that we were talking about before. Like, bad guys aren't just going to pack up and go home if we make phishing too hard for them. They're going to find ways to increase the volume of it. And now with particularly kind of the availability of generative AI and LLM powered stuff, like, you can make up in numbers what you're losing on quality pretty easily. That's not new, by the way. They've been using machine learning to do this kind of stuff in a scaled way for decades at this point in time, decade or more. So again, it's to me, it's kind of everything that's old is new again, but it's moving a whole lot faster. I think what that really implies is this kind of cat and mouse game that I implied before. It's going to accelerate. Yeah. And the idea of the bad guys being ahead and then the good guys catching up and then the bad guys innovating past that, they're not, again, going to pack up and go home because we've gotten so good at what we're doing. They're going to continue to innovate. And I think AI just speeds that up.
Yeah. Thank you. Jennifer?
Yeah, I think we have a lot of opportunity to leverage AI. I think some of the risk we have with it right now are there's obviously a lot of confusion or lack of regulation around it, and there's nobody understands what that's going to look like in the future. And so I think there's a lot of reservation with certain organizations of a large size that could do something that are holding back a little bit until they understand what that's going to look like a little bit. From a more adversarial standpoint with the good guy, bad guy, perfect example, I was watching the news about a week and a half ago, and they were interviewing a woman, just like normal people, right? Not IT people, just normal humans. So they were interviewing a woman whose adult daughter in her early 20s had supposedly been kidnapped. And the kidnappers took this 22-year-old daughter, they had her, they called the mother, they put the daughter on the phone, and then they demanded a ransom. Except it wasn't the daughter on the phone. The ransom message was recorded AI. So they had harvested other clips. So we have all of these people putting things on social media. You've got your Instagram and your Snap this and whatever else kids are using these days. So they were able to take enough of those pieces to use an AI engine, which is a little bit expensive, but it's not cost prohibitive, to generate this fake voice of the daughter. And that's not the only case like that. So, we take that and we look at what could you do in an organization, in an enterprise with that type of an attack. And it's a little bit frightening. And so, we always say the bad guys only have to be right once. As defenders, we have to get it right every time. And the scales are just very tipped to not be in our favor when it comes to that. So we're going to have to be very smart about harnessing this technology, using it for good, and trying to keep up the pace with what the attackers are doing, or make it so hard for them that they find another revenue model that's not that.
Yeah, that's a very scary example. Oh.
Yeah.
Terrence?
Yeah. And I mean, that example, that's one of the scary things I think about AI, those deep fakes that we discussed that in the back room a bit between us. But at the same time, I also look at, so for me, AI is, what generative AI is to everyone else right now, how it helps you, how it may help you with your position, your job, speed things up, make you more productive, those types of things. I think it's doing the same thing for the attackers, that they're going to use it the same way, right? They're using it to speed up their knowledge, their attacks, maybe sophisticated. I think humans are pretty genius about how they've been attacking our networks for years and our data. They've obviously had a lot of success at that. So I think they have the ingenuity to do it. I just think that the AI is going to just speed that process up and maybe write code for them, maybe write other things for them that they want. They can use prompt injections to maybe break out of the safeguards of this AI and use it in a bad way, those types of things. But ultimately, to me, it's another technology, and from a cybersecurity standpoint, that you have to address. So if you're not doing the basics, like we talked about a little bit earlier about hygiene, about the basics of your cybersecurity threat, your cybersecurity solutions and the way that you deal with them today through, weekly stolen credentials, unpatched vulnerabilities, misconfigurations. If you're not handling those today, then this is only going to make it worse, because it's going to be I see the increase in the speed and the velocity of the attacks, right? But if those things are in place and you're solid in those areas, I think that could be a good defense already against a new technology like this, right? And at the same time, you're going to be using that same generative AI, hopefully to help yourselves in your own organization produce things that are going to counteract these attacks. And in the end, we were talking about this, but I think maybe it's going to be an AI against AI ultimately, where the only defense you've got is another AI against the one that's attacking you. I don't know, but it's just one of those things I keep thinking about, that maybe that's the only way you're going to be able to do it in the future. And hopefully we'll have friendly AIs around to help us out.
AI and especially generative AI, they are disruptive technologies. I think we need to prepare ourselves within our organizations how there is no business process which can be redesigned. I think you can put your generate these APIs to do network optimization. You can do preventive maintenance activities. You can raise trouble tickets with AI or ML. Giving a less time to the employees in less productive ways, but giving them more on a strategical and doing AI in a more productive and in a more innovative way, so that they can prevent the network from denial of services. They can prevent using these kind of technology. In your R&D, we have some use cases where in our applications we are taking it. But the only, I think, precaution as an organizations need to keep is that you cannot give your proprietary information in OpenAI. So you have to use your well-designed, trained machine learning algorithm, let's see, from Azure, from Google. But don't use OpenAI, because then they will even talk about that, we can charge for your IPR licensing. If you are creating something, then the AI providers will also say, hey, we contributed to this R&D development for you, now we hold the IPR. So you have to take your legal system with you. You have to set up a whole framework in your company. How do you approach AI? How do you manage it? And then put a playground. I think you should start with some of the use cases in R&D, in operations, what use case you can automate. And then maybe the less productive, give it to AI, make some decision-based kind of use cases where you need like a cell site sleeping every day. I think is a very common problem in networks, right? So you have to go and restart a cell site every night, but instead let the AI take a decision because it's a normal cell site. It is sleeping, and then you can also conserve the cell sites in a way that if you don't need, today there is no requirement in a stadium is empty, why do you need that cell site in that remote area, right? So AI can take a decision to make one sector down of that particular network, and then the next day in the morning when the users comes to latch onto the network, the AI ML again brings the network. So those are the very good advantages, but the disadvantages, like you said, the AI is a rat, right? So the malware and the ransomware, we are detecting more, but then the threat actors, they are adding more into that AI to put more, kind of a threat to us. So we'll see how it goes, but my take on this is to take an incremental approach in implementing in your organization how you can take the machine learning algorithms, make training available, take the legal system, understand the legal requirements of IPR and use cases and other stuff, and then approach and then use in your networks for AI ML implementation.
Okay, thank you. All right. So we touched briefly on compliance. And so I have a stat here that says a cyber compliance firm found that only 11% of companies were fully meeting CCPA requirements, which are the California Consumer Privacy Act. Why do you think this is a case? And what do organizations need to do to become more compliant? But I know we also talked earlier that compliancy does not mean that you're secure. So I'd like to hear your perspectives on this. Jennifer, you want to start?
Oh, Casey, sure, I'll jump in. I have strong feelings about this. I just think the U.S. does such a bad job with consumer privacy rights. Like, we suck at it here. It's horrible. And I think, we have pockets that are trying to remedy that and trying to put us back on the right track, but it's kind of like the ship has sailed a little bit, and reining it back in when you have entire, sections of our national commerce that are dependent on the sale and trading of that type of data, it's hard to wrangle that back in. And I think this is why a lot of the organizations aren't meeting that requirement. I think a lot of them, even the ones that are US-based, are still trying to figure out GDPR and make adjustments for that. And so, layering these additional, and, frankly, from a CISO's standpoint view of watching this, it is almost unmanageable to keep up with the different regulations. So you've got your industry compliance regulations, you've got different labor laws that might dictate, even in non-unionized areas, things even like your BYOD policy, and how you're managing that with your employees. And then you've got your geographical regulations. So if you're doing business or you have any records in Europe and you're doing GDPR, and then California with so it's really hard to keep up. And it takes, a team of lawyers to even keep up with that. And then you have to prioritize that from the business standpoint. So we're talking about here defending against these attacks. We're talking about meeting these privacy requirements. And at some point, we can't do everything at once. So I give organizations a little bit of grace in that I think some do want to do better, but there is, an entire subset of commerce around selling our data that they're collecting from apps that we authorize them to do. And this is one of the areas where I think it's unreasonable for us to read 20 pages of fine print to, see stuck in there. And, when Zoom changed their terms of use and basically said, we own everything you do on our platform, and we're going to train our AI engines with it. You're welcome. Yeah. There was a lot of blowback from that, but that was caught. So much else wasn't.
Yeah, well, I think there wasn't that much blowback from that one as well. I think it was sort of isolated and very loud, but then ultimately, how many people stopped using Zoom?
They changed it 24 hours later after that was public.
Oh, okay. There was the revision part. Yeah, where I was going before I made that mistake. I sort of, it's like ideally companies are getting proactive on this stuff, but there's the expression, until the pain of staying the same exceeds the pain of change, you just won't change. I think, to your point, the definition of privacy is difficult enough to pin down, so there's that problem. And then there's this idea that like, well, does the consumer actually care as much as they should, quote unquote? Like, what does that even mean? I think actually answering that question, even as a business to begin with, is kind of difficult. So going back to your like 11% adoption rate, and then, okay, the knock-on effect of that is you've got the CCPA, you've got the fact that B2C issues like this do tend to become issues of retail politics, and if they don't seem to care that much, then the idea of enforcing top-down is going to become less likely. So you end up in this sort of unvirtuous loop where it was a great idea to start to create a regulatory framework, but because there isn't enough attention to the problem, it doesn't necessarily get adopted. I think that's at the root cause of this particular one.
Yeah, and I actually had to do, in my last company, we sold internationally, so GDPR was a big part of what we had to comply with. And I think initially the executive suite weren't taking it seriously, right? I mean, that was one of the problems that I kept telling them, hey, this law's coming, and yeah, we can get big fines for not, meeting this. And it just wasn't taken seriously. And I agree on the consumer side that we're so about wanting these apps to do what we like them to do and all these things that we just hit that button and that agreement just goes right on by, right? I mean, maybe I'll use AI and dump some of these agreements in there and see what they can tell me about what's going on inside these agreements.
I need my Angry Bird.
But I think we're a part of it because we allow it too, right? The other issue is with the regulation side. I had to have just the tool, I had to have this one tool that helped me manage privacy, right? And then under GDPR and similar to CCPA, you had to list, this is one funny thing I ran, they said, I was negotiating a contract with a European company, and they were saying, well, we want you to tell us your sub-processors, and then we want you to tell us who your sub-processors are. And I'm thinking, okay, so Microsoft, how many sub-processors do they have? And then how many sub-processors, so I think it starts to get kind of ridiculous at some point, but at least in the European side, they're doing it nationally, and they say that this follows the EU citizen wherever they travel in the world, right? And so now you've got CCPA, and you've got all these other states beginning to think about this and maybe putting some things in place. But it really needs to be the federal government that says, just like the Europeans did, if you're an American citizen, this follows you everywhere, right? So if I'm in Europe and you're actually sending an app to me, or I'm going to take your app on, I need that consent. I got to give you my consent, and I can take that consent away anytime I want. And I can also make a subject request of you to hand over all my data or delete all my data whenever I want. And it should be easy, right? So it should be, if I leave Facebook, right, you have to delete all of my data under these privacy laws, right? And so on the GDPR side, that's one of the things we found was, could you imagine going and finding that individual's data around every system in your company? Well, that's part of GDPR. You have to do that, right? You better figure that out. So, having consent and making it easier, give me back my data, completely erase my data, unless it's legally required by the government or something. Those kind of things, just making those easy so that you as an individual, I think it's the individual that's going to have to decide that I want my data. I want you to get rid of my data. Do not sell my data. All those things should be there and make it easy for you.
Yeah. Gagan?
I think privacy and security, they go side by side. So most of the people say security is the way to achieve privacy. And I agree with everyone here, but I'll say in a different slang. So standardization is the key. So there are so many compliance regulations. We are been for CISA or GDPR, the California law, and then some other countries. Regulations which keep imposing. It's very hard to cope up with all those compliance every day. Once you fix your baseline in a network, then your baseline requirement changes, and then you have to cope up with another guidelines. That's why I think as a company, we standardize that we will follow these GDPR, and then rest of the additional controls, which are the gaps, we'll try to fit in and map it. So I think there are a lot of tools now available within organization where we map these different controls so that we can say that, okay, we are following up with GDPR, but then additional delta is being taken care of. And that's but at the end, the consumer is worried about their privacy, that their location data is not tracked, their voice and SMSs are encrypted, it's not being tabbed and sent to anyone. The applications they send on 5G network, like financial or banking applications, they're sending in on a trusted network, and it's not, intercepted at the middle of the attack and then gone somewhere. So they have some laws to privacy that my data should not be compromised, and the data integrity has to be there. So that's why I think there's a more encouragement on using the trusted network, so that we know when we implement 5G networks is how we make trust everywhere into different things. So standardize, use the secured networks like 5G we have, and then achieve some of these regulations and standardization on that.
No, I'm glad that you brought it all back to standardization.
Yeah.
Keep it simple. All right, so I believe, Solar, we actually have a question online.
Yes, we do. It's from Joseph Poole. And the question is, with the use of AI deepfakes for scams, how do you help your family be prepared so they don't fall for the scam?
Oh, gosh. Okay,
Pray.
I'll start while you guys think about something better than what I'm about to say.
Is there like
I'm just gonna buy you time here.
for the family?
Well, like I've heard some, and I'm curious because I think law enforcement is, chasing this as well. What I have heard so far might not be helpful, but it's have some type of code or some way to validate that person. Kind of back to, though, how am I supposed to remember all of these stupid code words that we made up for different things? So I don't know how valid that is, but even if it's just let me have a conversation with the person and you ask them something that only they're going to know the answer to, or you hope it's something only they will know the answer to, because a lot of those tools, there is a little bit of a processing time, so you can tell it what you want it to say, but there is going to be some lag. And in some of the investigations that the law enforcement has released, you can even hear them typing in the background while they're getting the AI to return an audio file. So I don't know if you guys have something cooler than that.
I'm a big believer in fostering productive paranoia. Like, you don't want to freak your family out, but getting them paranoid enough to stop and think before they do something harmful is probably not a bad thing. These tools are cheap. Like, you can literally, there's the name escapes me right now, but if you literally go online and look up audio, like AI audio voice synthesis or something along those lines, $15 and 30 seconds of audio, and you can actually demonstrate to your family what it would look like if it was an attack on you. I think there's merit to doing that type of thing. There's content out there where people that educate on social engineering are doing that same thing. I just think it's like, oh no, that's science fiction. That'll never happen to me. Like, getting people past that step, I think, is pretty important in the particular juncture of all of this that we happen to be in right now. The one other thing I would say is, there needs to be legislation passed that actually makes this illegal. And currently, like, that's fairly nebulous in this sort of area. The idea of impersonating someone's likeness, like, that's a very specific violation, I think, of a personal civil liberty that isn't necessarily getting a ton of attention from a legislative standpoint. So, like, y'all vote, call up your local representative, get talking to them about that, and actually start to try to influence it from the top down as well. Because this is an issue that affects everyone. That's not normally my answer to security questions, but this particular one, we're all ultimately going to encounter this at some point over the next 5 or 10 years, right? Everyone in this room, everyone who's listening online. So now's a good time to, have the crowd have its voice, so to speak.
Thank you. All right, it sounds like we have another question online.
Yeah, there's another one that just came through from Antonio Underdew. Outside of hygiene, what are the top 3 qualities or work ethic needed to stay ahead of hackers at all times?
Aside from
hygiene.
Hygiene.
Aside from hygiene.
Got it. My favorite definition, how I explain what I believe a hacker to be, is it's someone who takes the assumptions of a thing, tips them upside down, and sees what falls out, and then tries to figure out what they can do with that. It's not necessarily to break into something. There's the criminal creativity version of it, which that's my backstory as a hacker. That's not necessarily the only kind of trait of someone who self-identifies as a hacker. I think the 2 biggest ones that consistently come out is curiosity and tenacity. So this curiosity to literally tip the thing upside down in the first place, because most of the time when you do that and there's someone who doesn't think like that looking on, the first question they're going to ask is, why the hell did you tip it upside down? Like, it's a perfectly useful thing. You've gone and ruined it, right? And it's innate. I think there's people that are just born that way. I do also think that curiosity can be fostered. So that's one part. The other part is tenacity, because it can be boring sometimes. You got to really dig into stuff and try to get to the outcome that you want. That it's not this kind of magical click the fingers. And anytime that sort of thing happens, when you see a tool where you press a button and all of a sudden the computer pops open and does amazing things, it's because of thousands of hours of research that have gone into making that tool, right? So just thinking about it that way, curiosity and tenacity would be the two. I can't think of a third one.
And was it Antonio? Thank you. That's a great question.
Yeah, I had one more thing to add to that. Besides, if you have your cyber hygiene down, right? Now we're talking about advanced techniques, right, for cybersecurity. I think one of the, the old honeypot, right? That's evolved. There's some solutions out there that have evolved called deception technology, which is great. I mean, it actually guides that individual down to an isolated area where then you can watch and observe what they're actually doing. I really think not a lot of companies have implemented that. I don't know any percentages. I haven't looked at any data, but I think that's something that should be probably pursued if you feel like you have everything down at the basic level. That helps with a lot of different things, including insider threats, not only attackers, but anybody inside your network. So I don't think that's been really broadly implemented inside enterprises today.
Just to add is the data leakage, like don't put information everywhere, where most common people, the hackers are taking it because you are putting more information and they are social engineering it to take your data out from you. And that's a basic thing. And then like brand mirroring, if you see a lot of emails coming from Amazon, coming from any other retail centers, but you see actually it doesn't come from that domain. That's the basic stuff. Look out to the domain, but not the Amazon as a brand which comes an email to you. So you get attempted to be hacked because you see that brand and then you just reply to it, but it doesn't come from those brands, so from that domains.
Sorry, just want to make a correction. You were talking about the family, though, weren't you? Or you were talking about companies, right?
Well, I am only reading the questions that are submitted.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Sorry, I was thinking. I
Someone
understand
online.
that about a family, no. The enterprise, I think, was the second question.
Yeah. Two separate.
I just want to
two
make
different
sure.
people. Yeah.
Yeah, two.
Yeah.
I'm going to answer that a little bit differently, though, and say I think, so one of my frustrations in working in this industry for so long is that I think we have all of these like shiny, cool things, and it's like whatever the latest acronym is that Gartner or Forrester came up with, we want to do, the CISOs and the CIOs walk around and they're like, yeah, I heard about cloud, let's go make that happen, let's do cloud. Oh, zero trust, hey you, yeah, make zero trust happen. But the reality is like if you look at most of the attacks, they're not sophisticated.
Yeah.
It really is the basic, back to the basic hygiene, but then it's, are you washing your hands for 3 seconds or 40 seconds, depending on whether we're in COVID times or not. And it's tiered, like we have to work through the maturity of where we're starting, and I think that understanding where you are as an organization and your posture, because getting to the point where you're mature enough to implement a deception technology, which is super cool stuff. Most organizations think they're there, but they're not. And a lot of it is it's just the basic stuff, but the problem is it's boring, or we think it's boring, and we think that because it's basic and boring, somebody else is already doing that. I want to do the cool stuff. Surely, an organization my size, somebody over there in that department, you guys are handling that, right? Yeah, no, you're doing the basic stuff. I'm doing the cool stuff, and so nobody ever does it. That's the crappy truth about it.
Yeah, and the sophisticated attack is the one that succeeds. So it doesn't really matter how
right.
sophisticated.
Yeah, if somebody has the right resources and motive, and they're targeting you, they will succeed. It's just how long is it going to take them, and are there indicators along the way that might tip you off to that? But so many of even what we thought have been recently the more sophisticated targeted attacks were still things that if you had done like even the CIS like 20 basic controls, or 18, they're at 18 now, right? Yeah, 18 like basic controls. If you do nothing else, do these 18 things. that would have stopped, 99.98% of them.
True.
So
All right, well, thank you. Well, we are at time. Wow, some great perspective. Thank you so much for sharing. Let's give our panelists a round of applause. Also, our audience, thanks you guys, and folks online, some excellent questions. So, good news, our next speaker series is November 7th, and the topic is retail, just in time for the holiday shopping season. So be sure to go to our website, techexperience.com, to register for that. For those here, as always, the networking will continue. We've got the demos. Of course, the bar is open, so let's keep the conversations going on cybersecurity. So thank you very much.
Feeling good.